across the country are calling on Washington to take action on gun control. There have been more than 35,000 gun violence incidents this year. Look at that map. Those incidents have claimed more than 9,200 lives. 261 of those are considered mass shootings.
It gives you a sense of how many mass shootings we don't cover here on the news. CBS News correspondent Adriana Diaz spoke to 4 mayors who are part of the growing group of local politicians pushing for bipartisan gun safety legislation.
Mayor Whaley, how is your community doing?
We're in the process of grieving, and so people are in different places right now. I've been really amazed by just the togetherness of the community and how cohesive it's been. And I think, there's still some shock out there.
Mayor Hunchofsky, I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, the first week, shock is probably the best way to describe it. When a mass shooting happens, and it happens in a place it's quote unquote not supposed to happen, you lose trust in everything.
You have called this now a fraternity. What does that mean?
It means it's a fraternity no one ever wanted to join. There is no playbook. There's nothing that prepares a mayor for this type of incident.
Have mayors reached out to give you their best practices?
Yeah, I think, so it's hundreds of mayors, and that's been very touching.
One of those hundreds was Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, who met with Mayor Whaley before our panel discussion.
When you reached out to Mayor Whaley, what did you say?
I just shot her a message that we loved her, we're with her, and I know how resilient the people of Dayton are, but I also know that they want to see change.
Bowser, Whaley, Hunchofsky, and Dyer have all signed a letter to Senate leaders Mitch McConnell and Charles Schumer, demanding that the Senate approve 2 universal background check bills that the House passed in February.
Mayors quickly move around the issue of gun control because it affects our communities so directly. You saw this past week 254 mayors sign a letter to say, hey, Senate, get to work and pass background checks.
In all 3 of your cases, shooters passed background checks, so why do you see that as the answer?
Universal background checks tied to risk protection orders together can make a difference. I'm hopeful that we're starting to see this movement happen now.
You see that as a first step?
I do.
Yes.
This could just start with that one conversation with, the background checks, where they might be able to find consensus. But then once you start the dialogue, then you can go into the heavier things.
Do you want to see an assault weapons ban?
Right now, with the partisanship going on, I think we have to establish the base first before we have that, before the conversation. Let's start with the background checks.
But eventually, I do think, the way to get rid of these shootings is to get rid of the assault weapons. And I don't understand why anybody would need the kind of gun that was on the Oregon District Saturday night that killed 9 people in 32 seconds.
People make the argument that even if you had no guns in this country, you still will have incidents where there are mass casualties, which we have seen in this country.
Yes, we have.
But you won't see 250. I think that's the point. The guns are just so easy to get a hold of.
You're a Republican mayor. You had this incident happen in your community. Did you change your views on gun control?
I am more acutely aware. I honestly think right now, the pro-gun people have good points and bad points, and the same is true for the opposition.
What would you say to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell? You are a member of his party. You have been there. You have seen this up close. What would you say to him to bring about the policy changes you want to see? Listen
and learn from other people. Take the opportunity to figure out, there may be better ways of doing things.
Can I just say, too, this whole dichotomy of it's a partisan issue, it's only a partisan issue in Washington, D.C. Correct. 94% of Americans say universal background checks. It's not partisan in the streets of Dayton, in the streets of Virginia Beach, or on the streets of Parkland.
What Mayor Whaley said is spot on in the business world. You don't see a problem and you have 2 people in the company who say, well, I think this is the answer, and the other person calls them then names and says, no, I think this is the answer, and then they both just go away and don't do anything. That is not leadership. That is not representation. And I think that is what you hear often that the American people are just sick of.
It's an issue the mayors say affect all their cities, whether they experience mass shootings or urban gun violence.
They're all connected to the prevalence of guns and guns unchecked in our nation. We need to keep handguns out of the hands of people who have proven that they're going to do damage with those guns.
Do you think this is the moment?
I just pray it is.
Adriana Diaz is joining us now to talk a little bit more about this. So this issue is bonding these mayors across sort of party lines. You mentioned that they reached out to Mitch McConnell, they reached out to Chuck Schumer about these bipartisan bills that have to do with background checks. Give us the details. What specifically are in those bills?
So 254 mayors from the U.S. Conference of Mayors signed this letter demanding that the Senate come back into session, pass these two bills. So bill number one is H.R. 8, which is a bill that essentially closes a loop in background checks. Right now, in a private sale, a background check doesn't have to happen. So this is requiring background checks universally, even in private sales. So that is huge. The second one, H.R. 1112, is a bill that would extend the period during which a background check has to take place. Right now, it's just 3 days. And if the background check response doesn't come back, that sale can still happen. This extends it to 10 days to give the system more time to conduct that check.
I mean, it sounds logical, and I know that people who are against this will say, look, if you give an inch, they take a mile. I understand that, but you know, for I think most people, when the polling shows the majority of Americans want something sensible, that does sound logical to me. Have either senators responded to the mayor's letters?
So the senators haven't responded directly as far as I know, but Mitch McConnell did say on a radio show, I think it was last week or earlier this week, saying that he is open to the idea of discussing background checks. Now, the president called for universal background checks. He said on Twitter that he thought that that made sense. Bear in mind, he said that after Parkland too, and then he dialed that back. But it seems that at least now, Mitch McConnell's on the record saying he's open to discussing it. And I asked these mayors, I said, what if it fails? What if the Senate votes down these two bills? And Mayor Whaley from Dayton said, well, if they vote on it, I'll be happy, because Americans deserve to know where their senators stand on this issue.
So there is a bit of a counter argument to this, right? People will say, look at El Paso. A background check would have made a difference there. He purchased that gun legally. His mother allegedly called police because she was concerned, and police said we can't do anything about it.
And some people will also say, look at Philadelphia, that guy should not have had a weapon, and he still had it.
But people can't. So the mayors say this is just the opening, the beginning of this conversation. Ultimately, what do they really want to see happen?
Ultimately, honestly, I think they just are focusing on this opening, this first step, because I said to them, exactly, you're totally right. In all three of their cases, all those three mass shootings in Dayton, in Parkland, in Virginia Beach, the shooters purchased guns legally, went through the background check system. So had these bills been implemented then, had it been law, it wouldn't have changed anything. They said it doesn't matter because this is an important first step, and this is the one place where there is consensus. Let's focus on this, and then we can take on what Mayor Dyer from Virginia Beach said, the heavier issues, assault weapons and that sort of thing. And they are split on assault weapons. Mayor Dyer does not believe that there should be an assault weapons ban right now. But, you know, of course, Mayor Daley said, Mayor Whaley from Dayton said that that's exactly what she wants. She says that she wanted the Senate to vote on these background check bills yesterday. That's what she said.
So speaking of Mayor Bobby Dyer of Virginia Beach, he's a Republican mayor who had an incident of gun violence that happened in his community. And you asked him whether or not that changed his views on guns. Let me play a little bit of that.
Let me put it this way, I'm more acutely aware. Quite frankly, you know, gun control and thing that wasn't really as much on my radar because I had so many other things that, you know, had to be done as the duties of a mayor of a city. But once again, you know, as we listen to people want us to do something. Okay, and that something has to be something that at least we can get as much consensus as we can. Now, if we can achieve that, now we got something to build on. Now we can go to other things.
You know, it's good that he understands now what this problem plaguing this country is, but it's probably a little disheartening for the members of his community when you hear him say, look, I wasn't really focusing on that. I wasn't thinking about that, because these are not isolated incidents. They don't happen in a vacuum. They happen all the time in this country. So it almost sounds, to me, that yes, it's great that he's had to come to the realization that it's an important issue, but could have saved a lot of lives if he'd come to it earlier. I don't know.
Well, in his defense, Virginia Beach, as you know, is considered one of the safest cities in America. It's a huge military area. They're probably, and I'm not from there, I don't know, but I would imagine that there isn't a huge debate about gun legislation because a lot of people, I'm sure, own guns.
Sure.
Right.
This is a military community. So I think that's what he meant, that it wasn't really on his radar. And to be honest, he didn't answer that question directly. I asked him several times, did you change your position on gun legislation? You're calling for background checks now, but did you believe in universal background checks before this happened in your community? And he didn't answer that directly. He said now he's more aware of the issue, and now he is joining with the other mayors and calling for background checks. He didn't tell us what his position was before. Maybe it was the same. But he did say that he doesn't believe in an assault weapons ban. What he was really focusing on, what he kept repeating, was that what we need to do is listen to each other. And he said everyone is focused on their cell phones and social media. We need to talk to each other. We need to come to a consensus. We need to see where there is an opening. And right now we see that opening with background checks, which the mayors say 94% of Americans agree on. So if there is agreement there, let's start with that. Then we can have those tougher conversations.
I mean, I can understand that, right? Because this debate has been sort of a non-starter, and I think a lot of us remember, after Sandy Hook. I think almost everyone said, if something doesn't change after Sandy Hook, then it will never change, right? And we probably said that about Parkland too. Right. It just seems like taking baby steps in the wake of these two mass shootings, and maybe it's just the proximity to the mass shootings time-wise. It seems like baby steps isn't really the appropriate response.
Well, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, is what they probably told you. I mean,
and that's exactly the conversation we had. I said to them, we thought it was going to happen after the community that wants gun legislation thought it was going to happen after Sandy Hook, then after Parkland. Why do you think now's the moment? And Mayor Whaley from Dayton did say when she was outside with DC's mayor, I think the proximity of these two shootings, El Paso and Dayton, happening so close to one another, that was a tipping point. Because now everyone is on notice. This will happen. This will affect every city in America if we continue down this path. So that's what they're hoping, that perhaps now might be the moment where there is legislation.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is that it is a multiple-pronged issue. And certainly background checks is one component. The president talks about mental illness. That's also a component. I mean, all of this will make sort of this a better society.
I guess the good news for people is that elected officials are taking this and they're listening to the constituents and they're looking at the polling, and at least they are beginning to have a discussion. Where that leads,
and they're putting their partisan differences aside to have that conversation.
And what the mayors will say is, as mayors, they are the closest to their communities. They hear when their constituents are annoyed with them or disagree with them in the supermarket, that they are required to act, unlike what they say, a lot of these lawmakers in D.C. who are removed. So they are trying to encourage our legislators in D.C. to be more reactive, like they are as mayors.
Right. Adriana Diaz, always nice having you here.
So good to see you.
Great conversation.
Great to see
Thanks,
both of you.
Adriana.